And so she was banging on the door, trying to force her way in, then leaned over, smashed the window to the bathroom, which was the smallest bathroom, and then swung over like Spider-Man into the unit, but then got stuck halfway in the window.
And he said, no, that's not it. Like, what do you mean that's not it? He said, no, people stopped running a few years ago. Why would that happen? He's like, well, I got a BB gun. And so I was there periodically. And so he was telling me that he single-handedly stopped the foot traffic across those roofs. So you have to think about how if you have someone who works with you, who you care about very much, what sort of situation are you having them walk into?
Every landlord has heard this at some point or another when they're talking to someone else about their real estate investing journey. But what about this? Or I read a news article about this crazy tenant, or I heard about this crazy incident happening. That's going to happen to you, or has that happened to you, or what's your craziest tenant stories? Well, 2020 has kind of been a crazy year. And first, as I say throughout the video that you're about to watch, I want to give a disclaimer. 99.9% of my tenants are absolutely amazing people that we work well with together, and everyone has the best of intentions. But understand, I've got over 100 tenants. So even if 99% are amazing, that still means that there's going to be 1% that are maybe a little quirky. Maybe even a little bit more than quirky. Maybe they're batshit crazy. And so in today's video, myself and Jon Kepler are going to just discuss some of the crazy stories we've recently experienced as landlords during these crazy times. I hope you guys get some enjoyment from it. As well, I hope you maybe can learn one or two things about it. And we're just trying to make light of some unusual situations. No intention for harm, foul, or bad intentions is really part of this whole video series. It's just about kind of having fun, making lemonade out of the lemons that sometimes as landlords we get dealt. Let's dive into today's video.
What is up, you guys? Matt McKeever here, and I'm really excited to have Jon Kepler back on the channel. Hey, Jon, how's it going?
Great. How are you?
Good. So I don't know what it is about 2020, but it kind of feels like it's been a full moon every day of 2020. So between, there's all the memes out there about all the crazy stuff that's gone on. And while, first, before I start going down this rabbit hole, I guess I should really qualify this. 99% of my tenants are absolutely amazing. 99% of the time, my real estate goes amazingly well. However, there has been some really peculiar situations this year in 2020 that I found myself in with a handful of tenants, and sometimes not even necessarily tenants. But, to me, it's almost the law of large numbers. It was eventually going to happen just because I've got a lot of tenancies. I know you as well have a lot of tenancies in your portfolio. So I thought it'd be kind of fun if we just explored in a not naming names sort of way, but just maybe some of the crazy stories that we might have experienced this year or in the past. And I don't want to put you on the spot, so I'm happy to go first.
Sure.
We've converted a lot of our units over to Airbnb. And recently, well, not that recently, but pre-COVID, we had someone stay at our Airbnb, and it turns out he had some legal trouble. And that legal trouble stemmed from him killing a person, essentially.
Wow.
And so he was on the lam, I guess would be the right term, and stayed at our Airbnb, and we had the cops come. Makes sense. But they kicked in two wrong doors before they got it right. So it turns out the third time is a charm.
Oh,
and so just a crazy experience where I'd never dealt with that before. I've dealt with, people pulling fire alarms. In fact, Christmas Eve this year, we had someone pull a fire alarm 5 times in one night. And it turns out I learned that the fire department can fine you substantially for that sort of behavior, which, lesson learned, thousands of dollars, it turns out, for false fire. And it just goes right to the landlord, which, a bit of a frustrating situation, but part of the business. But this was the first time having this sort of scenario and literally having the police kick in doors, but then kicking in the wrong doors. And we ended up being footed with, I believe, over a $5,000 bill in doors to replace, because they're all fire-rated doors, right? And things of that nature.
Wow.
I wish that was my only crazy story of 2020, but maybe I'll pause here first and hear about, have you had any interesting situations so far this year? Has it been a full moon for you as well?
Fortunately, I don't think it's been as much of a full moon for me as it has for some other people I know. So I just feel very fortunate. It doesn't mean we've had no issues, though. Also, it's interesting. You hope you become more skilled as time goes on and as you become more experienced, and I'd say that's been true with me. So it's funny you mentioned that this person who was wanted and how you had to deal with that. Some of my worst stories that are like that were pre-COVID or years ago when I was less experienced. I remember I had the roommate who was carried off to jail, but his parents continued paying his rent. So then when he got out of jail, I let him back in my own home, and then he went to jail again. And so I thought, let's just cut it off at twice. So, that's one thing I did before I was experienced, fortunately, many, many years ago, pre-COVID. But we've had some issues with people either not wanting their apartments or not knowing what to do with their apartments. And God forbid they talk to their landlord or ask what their options are. So we've had a few that were very open and honest about the fact that they needed to leave for certain reasons. Maybe they lost their job in the town where they were living, and so they decided to move to a different town or something like that, or move back in with parents or family. So that's okay. We had some people who wanted to sublet without telling us. They don't really understand that the law dictates that we have to approve of a subletter. And of course, there are options for us to not, and we need to at least give it some consideration. We can't just say no subletters ever for any reason. We've got to at least look at it. During COVID-19, we've had some interesting situations. People aren't sure what to do with their apartments some of the time, and they don't always want to talk to their landlord or ask questions. We've had some people who moved out of the city, maybe their employment changed and they moved back in with family or in with parents, and that's okay. We worked that out. That was okay. Again, compared to how things could be with COVID-19, that's a relatively minor thing to deal with. But we've had people who don't understand that we need to authorize sublets and that you can't bring a subletter in without our permission. We need to consider it. We can't just say no subletters ever, no exceptions. We need to at least look at the facts and take an application from the person and so on. But there is an official way for dealing with it contemplated by the province of Ontario. So there's an established system for going through it. So it's a little frustrating when there are strange people in your apartment. You don't know where they came from. They certainly haven't made any efforts to reach out to you. And we've talked previously as well about how we have people on the ground who are attending properties for us. So I'm not personally able to attend because I'm very far away. So you have to think about how if you have someone who works with you who you care about very much, what sort of situation are you having them walk into? So we had someone who moved out. I think for a time they intended to, if not sublet, perhaps have a roommate, but then from their perspective, this isn't legally correct, but from their perspective, they might have tried and failed to end their tenancy. They wanted to end their tenancy, and the province of Ontario certainly says they have the right to end their tenancy, but they just felt that their best attempt to end the tenancy wasn't really going well, which I didn't know was a thing. I thought if a landlord and a tenant agreed to end a tenancy, then, it's over, right? So there was someone there, and at first the tenant tried to say, get out of my apartment so that I can end my tenancy. And then that transitioned to, it's not my apartment and I have ended my tenancy, but I don't know about this guy. So anyway, the bottom line is we did get our way. We got our apartment back. The tenant wanted us to have our apartment back. The tenant didn't like the idea that they would be liable for whatever went on at that apartment until we got the apartment back. But we had to hire private security at our own expense. And then the police didn't want to remove the person because there was a lack of understanding, not just of what was taking place, but of landlord and tenant law, of the Residential Tenancies Act. So we had to call our legal team. We had a paralegal talk to a couple of officers. One officer got on board, and then he went home to sleep. And so then we had to start from scratch when the next officer came along. Things like that, right? But anyway, the bottom line is this sort of thing didn't used to happen quite like this pre-COVID. But in any case, we're rolling with the punches. We're resolving it. And these things are definitely a pain. They can definitely ruin your afternoon or ruin your late night, actually, as some of these things have turned out. But it's okay. It's temporary. And if you look at the end of the year, if you look back at our financials, we really aren't that affected. And we're grateful and privileged to be in a position where, in the grand scheme of things are pretty good.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And again, I do want to qualify all this. This is just kind of finding the lighter side of some of the crazy scenarios that honestly are inevitable if you're a landlord long enough with enough units, right? And again, these are the highlights. This isn't the hundreds of stories where everything just went well and we had wonderful tenants, wonderful relationships, and they were great. But that being said, I've got another story. And it's another crazy COVID-19 story. It involves an ex-girlfriend, not of mine, but of a tenant's. And apparently this ex-lover was really frustrated. Must have something to do with how the relationship ended. And it was in one of my 3-story walk-ups. And so she had found a way into the building, even though it's supposed to be a locked entrance. And he lives on the 3rd apartment. And so she was banging on the door, trying to force her way in. But, fire doors with deadbolts, it's actually pretty tough for someone to force their way into that unit. We have a roof access hatch that is locked, but it turns out it's a lot easier to break the roof access latch than it is to break a fire door that has a deadbolt. So she found a way to get up on the roof and then leaned over, smashed the window to the bathroom, which was the smallest bathroom, and then swung over like Spider-Man into the unit, but then got stuck halfway in the window. And the fire department had to be called to come resolve the situation because there's a lady sticking half out of my building from a broken window.
Wow.
COVID-19. I don't know what's going on with people. I'm pretty sure she was supposed to be social distancing. And I don't think that counts.
Wow, that's spectacular. We had one that wasn't nearly that eventful. I think we had a situation where people were looking to prevent exactly what happened to you. And we got a call from the fire department and they said, you have a lot of barbed wire on your roof. We do? No, we don't. And anyway, long story short, it wasn't our barbed wire. A neighboring property owner decided to erect significant barbed wire to prevent exactly what you're describing. And while they were successful in preventing it, the fire department wasn't happy. And I was just relieved that it wasn't my problem.
Interesting. Yeah, that never crossed my mind. My answer was, let's triple lock it. Let's just make it impossible to get on the roof. Barbed wire would have been taking it to the next level, though. That would have really put us in that post-apocalyptic mindset for COVID-19. Maybe get some searchlights just like going all over the yard and things of that nature.
I was talking with someone, and this person must remain very anonymous, but I was talking with someone who I've known in the town for a very long time, and I merely mentioned the existence of this barbed wire, and I said, I recall years ago, people would run across multiple buildings' roofs, and so I wonder if that run is what led to a building owner deciding to erect this barbed wire. And he said, no, that's not it. What do you mean that's not it? He said, no, people stopped running a few years ago. Why would that happen? He's like, well, I got a BB gun. And so I was sitting there periodically. So he was telling me that he single-handedly stopped the foot traffic across those roofs years before the barbed wire. It sounds like people aren't up there anymore.
Yeah, that's crazy. But I guess the thing is, the reason we don't have hundreds of these stories and we only have a handful is we've spent a lot of time building systems and processes to try and make sure that we get tenants that are a good fit into our buildings. I know in a few other videos that we've done, you've shared a few tips and tricks in regards to tenant screening and that entire process. Is there a few before we wrap up today's video that you could just share with the audience to maybe hopefully set them up for success so that they don't find themselves with some of the problems I've had or other landlords have had in the past?
Well, one thing we can quickly touch on is, and I hope it's okay to keep this somewhat COVID-19 related, because I know this video is obviously going to become aged and there are things we know in the future that we don't yet know today. However, much of my strategy up to this point has been to take advantage of open houses, to have many people come through. And you have lots of interest, you have many applications, and you simply, it's pretty straightforward. You pick the best application, and good people do apply, presuming that you have a high quality housing. So the problem now is our almost complete inability to do open houses. So now, like many other landlords, we are doing applications first. So we are asking people to apply for apartments that they have not walked personally. I very much appreciate and understand how that's problematic for them. So some of our efficiencies, unfortunately, have gone away, especially with the higher quality units. People really want to see them. It's important that they envision themselves in them. And we've had to have sort of a flexible strategy where I don't believe in refundable deposits, but sometimes during COVID. So we'll have to have discussions about how, yes, we'll take the deposit, but considering there's a pandemic going on, we are happy to have you do a walkthrough in a couple of days, and we'll absolutely refund you your deposit in full if you decide for any reason at the walkthrough you don't like it. Since you walked through and you didn't like it, you obviously wouldn't have applied in the first place. So it's frustrating that things take more time, though it is what it is. It's part of the game. We're still renting apartments in a good period of time. We just, I think previously we relished the fact that we had far more applications, 3 times, 5 times, 7 times more applications than we needed. And so now we're running on 2 times as many applicants as we need. So we're still selecting the best applicant. There are still good applicants that we have to say no to, but the numbers just aren't quite the same. So you asked me for what my tips were and how I could, explain how to make things go better. And I'm kind of explaining how now things are more painful and problematic. The bottom line is it's temporary. Open houses are going to come back. I think that even just paying attention every day helps a lot. I say that we're refreshing ads a lot more often than we used to. So the idea behind your question was that I was going to explain some of the good things that we could do and how we could be more efficient. And instead, I'm telling you that because of COVID-19, we're less efficient and that we've had to reverse our systems and do applications before open house, or applications before showings rather than large open houses before applications. But it's still, even though it's a little more painful, we're refreshing our ads more often. We're taking this opportunity to pay a little more attention to it every single day instead of just taking for granted the fact that applications are going to come rolling in. And then we're also keeping applications on file when permitted. So if we don't have the perfect application or the perfect apartment for a good applicant, we can hold it for a month until we find them the right one. I mentioned earlier that we did a refundable deposit. That we do that some of the time when we can't show someone a unit. So that has actually led to some lease up. We've, in one case in particular, I remember we put a lot of time into this one applicant who was very high quality, and then we had to refund them the deposit because we couldn't get them the right place. And then a month later, we got them the right place and it all worked out. And we basically got to save an entire round of showings and leasing, probably 12 hours amongst everyone on our team on that apartment because we already had a good application on file. So again, it can be painful to try to work through it and feel like you're not making progress. But if you can recycle some of the work that you've done, you prove an applicant, keep that application on file, and then maybe you can end up making it work out 30 days down the road.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point that I've never heard someone really mention in the past. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Jon.
Yeah, well, it's because it hit me right here because we have a team who does much of this, but that one time in particular where we refunded that person, I spent a portion of my whole day working. I spent way too much time on that person, and it really hurt when we didn't have an apartment that worked for them. And so you can imagine how the frustration turned to elation when a few weeks later we had the perfect apartment for them and we just got to skip through the whole process. So, sometimes you feel like you're unlucky, but then it all works out.
How often when you're looking at an applicant, are you simply looking at pure data versus your interactions with them and just kind of your gut feeling or instincts in that regards? Because I think a lot of people constantly struggle with, should I only look at their credit score? Should I only look at this one piece of data? Is there one piece of data I need to look at, or do I need to look at a comprehensive whole and also trust my instinct in regards to, do they feel like a good fit? And not only just a good fit based upon the paper, but are they going to fit with my other tenants? Are they going to get, like, do I think that there's going to be a cohesion here, or do I think that it's going to cause friction?
Well, I understand the concern in terms of how tenants interact with other tenants in the building, because it's going to be your monkey, I guess, your problem to solve if there's a substantial mismatch. Though the bottom line is you can't discriminate. And I understand that there are, in response to the whole, correct notion that you can't discriminate, it's amusing to me that there is such a large range of responses to that, such as, what do you mean I can't discriminate? Or, well, I've lost my edge because I can't discriminate, which isn't the case. So a lot of it comes down to simply how you approach things. And you don't have to forego good decisions just because you're trying to be fair. So in terms of apartment fit, and having the right person in an apartment, it is important legally that you sell the space, not sell the ideal type of applicant. So you wouldn't say perfect for a single person or perfect for a family. You would say this place has 4 bedrooms. And then when families came to you and said, I need 4 bedrooms, well, that's a lot more natural, and you can't be faulted for that. In terms of credit score, I love asking specific questions. Anytime someone has a blemish, it is at least cause for pause, though the fact that someone got in a fight with Rogers and that Rogers really wasn't very nice to them does not necessarily mean they're unethical and to stiff you on rent. So We've
all been there with Rogers or Bell.
That's the thing. I feel like when you're talking about telcos, everyone understands where you're coming from. So it depends on what the credit blemish is. And again, I simply ask open-ended questions. I see there's a problem. Tell me about it. And it's, frankly, it is on them to say, yeah, I definitely didn't pay my Rogers bill and I definitely have my reasons, but I value rent. And then beyond that, we do also feel it's very important to get a good reference. So from the last landlord, and make sure that they're happy. That the tenant has a demonstrable history of basically treating people well in the past.
Yeah, I really appreciate that nuanced answer there, Jon. And I want to highlight something for the audience in general. I know Jon knows his shit when it comes to renting out units. So that's why I kind of wanted to lay it up that way in regards to the subject matter, because I do find a lot of landlords have good intentions, but their approach is inappropriate for our legislation and just the realities of being a landlord in Ontario, Canada. So it is really important that we become informed and understand the do's and do nots, because if you do find yourself on the wrong side of the law, there are serious potential consequences for us as landlords. So it's important that we just understand the rules of the game and play within them to the best of our ability.
Absolutely. Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Jon. Any other last minute tips in regards to tenant selection or approaches in regards to how to maybe minimize our investment in time while still making sure that we're doing the appropriate amount of due diligence?
Well, I think it's important to do as much as you can virtually. I personally don't enjoy using the phone. I don't necessarily find the phone to be the most productive tool. It encourages people to, it encourages run-on sentences. It encourages maybe more conversation than is necessary. And unless you're taking detailed notes, you can lose data from the calls. So I do like text and email more because it can be reviewed later. So I think that it is important to meet people, and it's important for them to see the space in person. Again, because of COVID-19, we've had to reverse the order on that somewhat, but that in-person touch needs to occur. I don't think it can be skipped, but the time you're sinking into that can be limited, and then the rest of it can be done virtually. It's also nice because if the tenant works during the day or your schedule doesn't precisely mesh with their schedule, email back and forth, text back and forth, it all makes it the most convenient for all parties. So when you combine the extra convenience with the fact that it's a perfect record, we just like doing that a lot more than doing it all over the phone or kind of all by hand in person. I know a lot of people still do that, believe it or not, but it's once you get the bump in effectiveness, you find it very fulfilling and worthwhile.
Awesome. Love it. Thanks again, Jon.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Jon for sharing his crazy stories. I hope you guys enjoyed my crazy stories. I got a lot more of them, so if this is something that we want to see become a reoccurring segment, I'm sure I could also get Casey Wong on to talk about his crazy stories. So if you'd like Casey Wong's crazy tenant stories, I'm going to need you to tell me in the comment section down below. So Casey Wong, Crazy Tenants, let me know. We'll make it happen. But in the meantime, if you'd like to watch more Jon Kepler, I'm going to throw up a playlist right here. You guys want more Casey Wong? Let's throw up a playlist right here. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you're new to my channel. And remember, sharing is caring. So please share these videos if you get value from them, because, I mean, we're putting a lot of energy into it. Thanks, guys.